I'm Rip Esselstyn, and you're listening to the Plant Strong podcast. As many of you are aware, our beloved Chef AJ announced in November that she had been diagnosed with lung cancer. Shortly after that diagnosis, AJ agreed to come on and chat with me, even though there were still many unknowns. Her vulnerability and resilience is a gift for all of us. And I'll have that conversation with Chef AJ right after this. If you're enjoying the podcast, I want to include you in the conversation. Join the Plant Strong online Facebook community, where I'll invite you to post questions that you'd like to hear answered from our upcoming guests on the podcast. Click the show notes or search Plant Strong Official Group on Facebook. The reviews are in, and our all-new Plant Strong Meal Bundle Plan is helping people unlock real success utilizing a whole food, plant-based lifestyle. Susan from Fishers, Indiana says, I'm on day 5 and feel like $1 million. George from Hartford wrote to say, hey, Rip, thanks for the new bundle and meal plan. I've gifted it to my son, who has agreed to finally give the lifestyle a try. He will benefit from the no recipe meals. Thanks for working to make the lifestyle accessible. Well, George and Susan and everyone who's reached out, thank you for giving our new bundle a try. Our team designed 7 days of meals made from Plant Strong products, plus a small list of ingredients that you can find at any grocery store. The bundle includes a digital download of the grocery list, day-by-day menu, a quick batch cook guide, and a box of curated pantry products delivered right to your door. It couldn't be any easier or more delicious to test drive the lifestyle and experience what it feels like to be fully fed and fueled with Plant Strong nutrition. Simply go to plantstrong.com today and then click on the all-new meal plan bundle. It's a call no one wants to get. And it's a diagnosis that no one wants to hear. Stage 3 lung cancer. In November of 2024, Chef AJ announced that she was, in fact, battling with cancer. It was a shocking diagnosis, especially for someone who has been such a plant-based advocate for almost 50 years. And at first, as you can imagine, AJ was scared to make the announcement for fear of all the backlash that she was sure to receive about being so healthy. How can a healthy person get so sick? Well, instead of hiding, Chef AJ has turned her news into a new personal mission to help others with her YouTube channel, where she's posting daily interviews with doctors and survivors on thriving in the face of cancer. She's facing this journey with bravery, action, and her trademark sense of humor, and I love her for it. We recorded this conversation before the holidays, so I would encourage you to follow her social channels for up-to-the-minute news, but I wanted to make sure you hear it so you too can shower our beloved AJ with the support that she needs at this time. Chef AJ, welcome back to another episode of the Plant Strong podcast. It's so fantastic to see you, to be with you, and it's so weird having you be on the podcast without having your Chef AJ, apron on and making something for us.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm a person too. I'm not just a chef.
Incredible. I had no idea.
Yeah, but I do. I feel most at home though when I'm cooking though.
Yeah. Well, I just want to say you look fabulous.
Well,
you look fabulous. And what is with that shirt? It's so wild. It's got holes everywhere.
This is what I had. I was going to wear my kale shirt, but it's just, I love purple. It's my power color.
Yeah. Well, it works, especially with that hair.
Yeah. Well, the hair to match the match the shirt.
I love it.
Yeah.
Well, I so I want to say thank you for coming on, and I watched your Chef AJ live where you announced to everybody that you've been diagnosed with lung cancer, and watched every second of it. And I just want to say that I was so incredibly moved by your courage, by your openness, your willingness to talk about something so incredibly personal. And then also I think that Matt Lederman did a wonderful job also kind of helping you talk about it, moderate the conversation, so to speak. And it's obviously something, it's a topic it's uncomfortable to talk about. Mm-hmm. But I immediately reached out to you to see if you'd be willing to come on and talk about it, because it's life, right? And life it's messy. And this is just kind of, at this point, I think it's the hand that you were dealt. And I love the fact that you're dealing with it the best that you possibly can. And so I would just, I have no set agenda here, really. I just want to talk to you and see, listen, how near and dear to me and the Esselstyn family you are. And I would just like to better understand where you are and what we can do to support you. Not only myself and the family, but also the Plant Strong family that's listening.
Oh my God. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And, your mom was one of the first few people I told when I told only literally a handful of people, friends and family. And she's just been so incredibly supportive, calling me, texting me, emailing me, being my greatest cheerleader. So I really appreciate that about her and your family. So, it was really hard to come out. I mean, it's so funny, it'd be easier to come out for other things, I think, than that, because I was given a lot of advice that I shouldn't do it because it could hurt the plant-based movement. And, I respect that very much, because as somebody who's been an ethical vegan almost 50 years, I didn't want to come out with this announcement that this OG vegan now has cancer and have other people say, well, see, the vegan diet doesn't work. But we know that there are other reasons people get cancer than just diet. And I'm glad I did it, because I got to tell you, as somebody who's had anxiety my whole life, it's such a tremendous boulder was lifted off my chest just to be able to share it. And I am hearing from so many people, not just in the plant-based world, but in the world in general, that not only have cancer or survive cancer, but long-term survivors, people with lung cancer that have survived 10 and 17 years. And I'm going to actually change the focus of my work now to really dealing with thriving in the face of cancer, because I did not have hope for a very long time, because I could not get into any of the services that one normally gets when they're diagnosed with cancer, because it took 1.5 years to get an oncologist. But there is support out there, and there is hope. And I don't want people to go through what I did, not having any, when there is some, and I'm going to be featuring those kind of people. But, it's funny because, you always sell shirts that, you and I have joke about kale and, and, I do a lot of stand-up comedy, and that's my therapy. And one of the jokes I was recently coming up with is like, hey, if I knew I was going to get cancer, I wouldn't have eaten so much kale, But of course that's a joke, because you can't just throw kale at everything, although kale is extremely delicious and nutritious. But I'm hearing from a lot of people, Rip, in the plant-based world that, I can't mention their names because they don't want to come out, and that's their decision. I think people should decide to do what's best for them, because they're also afraid, like, well, what are the people going to think if me, as this plant-based influencer or author, now tells people, and it's amazing how many people other than me in the plant-based world either have cancer or have had cancer, and they're keeping silent about it. And that's fine if that's their decision. But I feel that in some ways you can actually help more people by revealing your truth. And a few psychologists reached out to me after the show and said one of the things that they always tell their patients is you're only as sick as your secrets. And just sharing it was like, and I wanted to do it sooner. I was going to with Dr. McDougall. He was going to be my like what Dr. Matt Letterman did. And then he had the nerve to die. And so I kind of tabled that for a while, but I'm kind of like a little bit of a deer in the headlights, because now I feel that, or I told people, so now I got to keep telling them like what I'm going to do, because part of me, after I said, this is what's happening, wanted to like, okay, but I'm not going to tell you anything else. I'm going to keep my treatment private. But Dr. Goldhammer said, no, don't do that. And, I respect him very much. And I am going to tell people what I'm going to do. And you know what? Somebody's going to be pissed off whatever I do. And I don't have enough lifetimes to do every single thing that people are telling me what I should do. It cracks me up when people say, if I were you, I would, because that is no, you wouldn't, because if you were me with my genetic history and my liver anxiety, you may not do that. So I can't see every single doctor that's recommended, drink every single tea that's been recommended, take every supplement. I do appreciate people reaching out. So my journey is going to be my journey. I have no idea what it looks like. Am I scared? Heck yes. I mean, I can't really think of very much scarier than this, but it helps that I'm able to share it, because there are people that are coming forward that went through similar experiences. And it's really giving me hope when people, get I'm not giving everybody my number, obviously, but like when a doctor emails the help desk and said, I'm a lung cancer survivor, stage 4, 10 years. Would you like to talk? It's very, very healing to hear that it's not always a death sentence,
Yeah. So can you tell us a little bit more about your diagnosis and where you are like today with the size of the tumors, and what stage are you and all that stuff?
Absolutely. So I almost wish you would wait just another week to do this, because I will know so much more tomorrow, because tomorrow I'm finally getting what's known as a tissue biopsy. That's where they take a needle. It's called a core needle biopsy. And that's where they hope to get as much tissue as possible to do the genetic testing and give you what the actual staging is. So right now my staging has been done by PET scan. And the last time I had a PET scan was October 18th, the day that I actually went to True North to attempt another water fast to shrink the tumors. And according to the PET scan, my staging is stage 3. And the reason I jumped from stage 1A to stage 3 is because the tumor had doubled in size. And I want people to know it didn't just double between CAT scans. This doubling time was about 2 years in the making. So the primary tumor that I have in my left lower lobe, that's about 2 millimeters from my aorta, that started the first time it was seen, which was March 23rd, 2023. It was 14 millimeters. So now it's doubled. It's now 28 millimeters, which is 2.8 centimeters. And because now I have what's known as a MET, or a metastases, I only have one, thank God, and it's in my bronchial lymph node. That's how come they jumped me up to stage 3. The thing that concerned me is when the Stanford oncologist told me this on November 5th, he said, well, now we have to get a brain MRI to see if the cancer has spread to your brain and bones. And so I did have that a few days ago, and thank God. But here's the thing. My problem isn't cancer. My problem is anxiety of having cancer, because for 40 days and 40 nights, just like in the Bible, I worried what the MRI was going to show. It took that long to get the MRI scheduled and to get the results, but I don't have cancer in my brain and my bones. And like, that was just a great, like, I remember crying when I read it. It was like, I was so happy that it didn't spread there,
So then that definitively then means that it has not metastasized to those
outside of the lung, right? But the one metastases I have is still in the lung, and it's very close to the tumor in a bronchial lymph node. Yeah. But they don't like it. I mean, nobody likes cancer, but especially oncologists, when they see it growing or spreading, they don't like it at all. And I don't know yet what I'm going to do for treatment, because the truth is, now without the tissue biopsy, there's really no definitive treatment offered. And so generally the gold standard for lung cancer is to remove the tumor. And that was offered to me early on when it was smaller. The thing is they couldn't get what's called clean margins. So I would have, if I do the surgery, and I'm not saying never now, I would lose or will lose my entire left lower lobe. And because I've had asthma my whole life, and COPD as an adult, I just felt like I'm like you, I'm like an exercise maniac, especially since being diagnosed with cancer, because Dr. Terry Shintani said, you got to really up the exercise. Exercise is so important,
Really?
cancer.
And then will you let people know who Dr. Terry Shintani is if they don't know who he is?
I love Dr. Terry Shintani. He is a doctor in Hawaii on the mainland who bought Dr. John McDougall's practice many years ago for the total sum of $1. He wrote the Peace Diet, and he, like you, follows a whole food, plant-based, oil-free, starch-based diet. And he helps the people of Hawaii who often have, problems with diabetes and obesity do that. And so, I think about the exercise is so important to me now because it helps anxiety, that am I going to be able to exercise to the degree I am now without that left lower lobe? And I nobody seems to know the answer. I just had some pulmonary function tests repeated, and some of the surgeons are saying, yeah, it's good enough, but nobody knows what it's like to live without a lobe until you live without a lobe. So I've had previous past experiences with general anesthesia where I've stopped breathing. And unless somebody can get to the bottom of that, like either with genetic testing or an anesthesiologist really takes this seriously, they won't do lobectomies without general anesthesia. And the reason I'm able to get the tissue biopsy tomorrow is that is a general anesthesia-free procedure. My doctor is willing to do it with nothing because I'm hardcore that way. I had my endoscopy done and my colonoscopy done without any sedation. And so he says he will do it with nothing, but they always do put an IV in just in case, if you're really uncomfortable, they give you a little bit of juice. And by juice, I mean like light sedation, like something called Versed. I told him I didn't want the fentanyl. So I can't tell you what it's going to be like until I have it. But at first they didn't want to do the needle biopsy because the tumor was too small. And it's hard, when tumors are small, it's hard to get them through a needle biopsy, especially when the tumor is in the dead center of your chest. But the interventional radiologist feels with the size now that he's going to be able to hit it. And I did have something called a blood biopsy, which is interesting. In our country, they don't consider that like meaningful. In other countries, I've interviewed some doctors where in England, people will do that, whereas it's a lot less invasive than a surgical biopsy where they're just taking your blood. And mine showed in December of 2023 that I was 99.6% positive or probable for what's called lung adenocarcinoma, which is non-small cell lung cancer.
Let's go back just for a second. And because, you mentioned Dr. Terry Shintani and then exercise. So I just want to talk about those two things for a second. You give one of the most brilliant calorie density lectures that I've ever seen. You do such an amazing job with it. And you reference, I think, Jeff Novick and I think Terry, and who's the woman from Penn State that's done?
Dr. Barbara Rolls.
Barbara Rolls, yes. But Terry, I give a calorie density talk as well. And Terry did such an amazing job with his Eat More Index, where if you want to eat 2,500 calories of food, and he shows you like how many pounds it would have to be. So I think he's great like that.
You've got to have him on your show. He's a wonderful human, and not a lot of people know about him.
I will. I absolutely. He's still in Hawaii, right?
He's still in Hawaii. I'll hook you up. Yeah.
Oh, that'd be great. So the other thing, so you mentioned exercise. Tell me, because I'm trying to picture what kind of exercise do you engage in? I just can't. Do you walk? Do you swim? Do you bike? What is it?
What I do is I own a spin bike, not a fancy Peloton. I got a used Kaiser many years ago when Dr. Doug Lyle said, look, somebody like you, if you have to spend the time to get in the car and drive to the gym and look for a parking space, you're never going to do it. He goes, just buy a damn bike. So I did. And I spin every day for a minimum of 60 minutes at the highest intensity I can do on that given day. But I do the whole thing standing. So, because I want to be drenched with sweat, I don't want to just take a stroll on the, I don't want to, you really, in general, it's better, but especially for cancer, you want to get all those toxins out. You want to really sweat. And so what I do is I do something else on the bike to distract me because I don't love exercise. So I'll play words with friends. I'll listen to a podcast like yours, or just do something fun or talk on the phone. And the next thing I know, an hour has passed. And when I have the time, I try to go 90 minutes.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So you mentioned a couple people in your life, but I'd love to talk about your support system that you've kind of put in place, having now been diagnosed with lung cancer. and all the emotional challenges that you must be, faced with. And can you talk about some of the support systems you have in place right now to deal with it?
Absolutely. And I wish I had known about these sooner. And that's another reason I want to do this series, Thriving in the Face of Cancer, so people know. I mean, if some people like to do things privately, and they can absolutely do that. But I would say to those people, and at least this is what I've been told, and when I've looked at the research, it shows that people that get support do better. In general, with any chronic disease, especially cancer. And so the thing is you got to find a social worker, because I didn't even really know what a social worker was. I know that was my mom's profession, but as a little kid, it's like, what do you do? I don't know. These are the men and women of the hospital systems that know what's going on, and they can get you into support groups for whatever your disease is, but in my case, cancer in general, and often your specific type of cancer. And these actually can become your lifeline. It's kind of like, I never drank alcohol, but I know I have friends that are recovering alcoholics, and their lifeline is going to AA meetings. And they don't just go to AA meetings when they're doing poorly or about to relapse or have relapsed, but they do it in general. They make this a priority. And I spend more time now going to these groups, but they're just, I can tell you all day what it's like to have cancer, and you'll be like, oh, yeah, I'm sorry to hear that. But until you have it, like the kind of anxiety you feel and what you're going through with the medical system and just with your treatments, you're with a group of people that have basically been there, done that. And so in all my support groups, I'm like the newbie, and it's like, they're not laughing at me in that way, but they're like, like, cause they've been through it. Right. And a lot of these people have had recurring cancers or different stages, but it's just, they become your rock. And I don't know how people, I have some friends right now that have cancer that have kept it to themselves. And I'm like, please just go one time, and they're free. And what's wonderful about them is, even if you don't, like, I'm in a support group at Stanford. I don't go to Stanford. Like, all the hospitals have them, and you don't have to be a patient at that hospital. And so it's pretty cool. And they have support for what they call caregiver or family. Like, I don't think my husband's doing very well, but he's a guy and he's stoic and he's not saying anything. And I'm like, please just go to one meeting, and then you can get supported if you're a family member of somebody with cancer. So there are things in place that I never knew of. And there's a lot of people out there, I mean, that want to help people with cancer, either because they had it or they had a family member with it. Because, I mean, listen, no disease is fun, and no chronic disease is fun, but there's something a little bit unique about cancer in that it's just so unpredictable. And what may work for one may not work for another. And that's why, while all this advice is well-meaning, I don't think people just understand that just because it worked for your Aunt Gladys, it doesn't mean it's necessarily going to work for me, because there's so many different types of even the same kind of cancer and what a person will respond to. And so, my feeling is I'm going to try everything. I'm not going to leave any stone. I mean, I'm not going to necessarily try everything all at the same time, because I really don't know if I'll go the conventional route, because part of me really doesn't want to take any medicine, and chemo sounds terrible. I don't know anybody that's had chemo that said, boy, that was great, let's do that again. There are people that have had surgery that said that wasn't so bad after they recovered. And the same thing with radiation. But if there's something that I can do that's gentler, like immunotherapy, or maybe some off-label drugs, or something that's less toxic, at least at first, I would like to try that.
No, I have heard that they've come light years with immunotherapy.
Yeah, that's what I really want. Because even Dr. Goldhammer, who, as you know, True North, he's not, not a big fan of the conventional treatments. He said, that's what I really want you to look into. But without the tissue, they can't just guess. And so that could be very helpful. Being a highly anxious person, my fear now, I'm over the fear that I'm going to get killed during the needle biopsy. I'm pretty sure that's not going to happen. That's, at least with the guy that's doing it, he's been doing it 29 years. He said, haven't killed a patient yet. And he said, he did say, you are the most anxious patient I've ever had, because most of the time when you have a procedure like that, you meet your doctor in the operating room. And I'm like, I need to meet you first. He met with me an hour. He talked to me for another half hour. So I felt really, really comfortable with him. But, there is a risk, and he acknowledges that sometimes with the best effort, they don't get all the tissue they need to make a conclusive diagnosis, which is unfortunate, because then you would probably have to do it again. And then the other risk, I'm told in about 20% of the cases, is they do puncture your lung, which isn't necessarily life threatening because, well, you're in the hospital, and then they have to admit you and give you a chest tube. So, people are saying, well, can you live stream it? And I'm like, well, I could, except the hospital just doesn't allow it. I mean, I would if people find it interesting.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Yeah. So I'd love to talk about some of the other support people you have in place. And you talked about it with Matt the other day. So for starters, Alan Goldhammer, True North. You said you were there recently. You attempted to go back and do a fast. Why the word attempt?
Well, no, I did do a fast, but you hear about these people these people, and they do 40-day fasts, right? And I mean, I don't know how that's even possible, because I can never seem to get to day 4 without having either vomiting or blood sugar of 46. It's hard because I don't have the reserves right now.
Yeah.
Maybe when I was, 80 pounds heavier, it might have been easier, I suppose, but it's still a true place of healing. And I love going there, because when I went there as a patient in 2011, I was very fortunate to be assigned to the doctor that's been there the longest, Dr. Peter Sultana. And I've always kept him in my world, like just talking to him from time to time, just about whatever was going on in my regular life. And because they do virtual consults, but once I was diagnosed, I was making a virtual appointment every month. So that was very comforting. And now every 2 weeks. And so they do know what's going on. But I'm very grateful to Dr. Goldhammer, because I mentioned on my live, he was the second person I called right after my comedy teacher, because as you know, when you're diagnosed with cancer, the first person everyone should call is their stand-up comedy teacher.
Yeah. You also mentioned Doug Lyle. So Doug has played an important role
an important role in this. And well, also, Doug, I believe it was Stanford where he was a statistics professor. So he would help me with understand things like doubling times, and more than that, just helping me understand the anxiety. So yeah, lots of sessions with Dr. Lyle since then. And even now, just for life things in general. So he's been enormously helpful, as is Dr. Goldhammer, and just True North in general has just, it's been fantastic, and when Dr. McDougall was alive, he, like, anytime I would get scared or anxious, he would just hop on Zoom and, just really comfort me and say things like, I really think you're going to beat this. You're going to die with the tumor instead of from it. And he actually came to some of my doctor appointments with me, the ones on Zoom, and you know what he's like. So they don't know, nobody messes with Dr. McDougall.
No. You also, there was this other strange person that was mentioned several times, the magical Mark.
Yeah, it's so, I'm not trying to hide him from people, although part of me feels like if I tell the world about him, I'll never get an appointment. So sometimes, some people are more open to experience than other people. And there's a lot of people that, you got to show them the data. You got to prove to them that it exists before they try it. But when Dr. McDougall had passed away, which was June 22nd, I had texted several of my friends and colleagues because, I was obviously sad and I wanted them to know, because we did a memorial service for him. And I remember texting Matt, and he said, "You're kidding." And I'm like, "No." And he goes, "Oh my God." And I said, he goes, "How are you handling this?" And I said, "I'm really sad because he was helping me with my cancer." He goes, "What do you mean you're cancer?" I'm like, "Oh shoot, I guess you're one of the people I didn't tell." Yeah. And so then he kind of just, came back into my life. We've always been friends for, I think since I met him in 2007 or so, but he sent me a lot of this compelling data that some of the plant-based doctors don't believe in, or at least some of the people that I've talked to, where that stress has a big impact on life in general, but on your ability to fight disease in particular. And this was stuff in the medical literature that basically said that while you can't really say that stress causes cancer, having stress is not a good thing when you have it. It can cause the tumors to metastasize and things like that. And he said, will you just trust me and do this thing? And I'm like, yeah, whatever. And so I did this thing. I can tell you exactly what this guy Mark does. If you saw the movie Inside Out or Inside Out 2, the Pixar movie.
I haven't.
All right. So it's an adorable movie where there's this young girl named Riley, and she has these parts inside of her. So in other words, the idea was there's part of her that's joy, anger, sadness, that we're all composed of different emotions. But in the movie, they were actual parts, and so they were cartoon characters, right? She was a human child, and these little parts were more like cartoon characters, and they were kind of running the control panel. And so if you understand that movie, you'll understand something called IFS, or internal family system, or parts work, which was developed by Dr. Richard Schwartz. And the idea is that we have all these different parts, and that the parts are there for a reason. So an example, like, I have anxiety is one of my parts. And instead of trying to shut anxiety up or medicate her with psychiatric drugs, you want to listen to what they have to say. And the idea is you can learn to accept them and love them, and then heal as a whole person. And so the work with Mark isn't to overcome cancer. He's not a doctor, but he just created a very warm space of, like, see, again, things that are experiential are very hard to describe, but it's partly because of who he is as a person. He's very gentle. He's got a very calm voice, and he just provided a space for me to heal. Now, every time I do the work with him, it's like, I say to him, like, this is stupid. This isn't going to work. This is just the stupid, like, I'm doing it. I'm resisting it, and yet it's helping me. That's all I can say. But the thing is it's not a one and done. And what I mean by that, see, Dr. Lisle for many people is a one and done. Like, if you book a session with Dr. Lisle, if you have a specific problem, like, you know, your spouse or your child or your coworker, one session with Dr. Lisle is often enough for you to get an answer. But with this kind of work, because we always have different emotions, we have these different parts, and sometimes they're, what Mark says, they're driving the bus. And the problem is most of my life, anxiety has been driving the bus. And the reason anxiety has been driving the bus is because anxiety has been trying to save me, specifically from getting another operation and dying, because the last time I got an operation, I stopped breathing from the general anesthesia. So I call him the magic unicorn, and I have since referred actually several people to him. And again, it's not for everyone, but I would encourage anyone to try it. You can't just do one session and expect to be cured. You know, it's just kind of, you know, he's not the Ozempic of mental health.
Right. And what about Charles and Bailey? I know that how, you know, they must be your rocks.
Well, Bailey unfortunately got sick at the same time as me. She had 2 strokes, mini strokes, but she, you know, her days are numbered. So I think it's harder for Charles because he's seeing the 2 ladies in his life kind of go through something. So, you know, I try to be positive, and that's where humor comes in. It's like, I don't know if you're familiar with a movie that Roberto Benigni won an Oscar for called My Beautiful Life, where it was basically a comedy in the concentration camp. And you go, well, how can you do that? That's disrespectful. But the idea wasn't they were making fun of the Holocaust. It's like, this was his reality. So find joy in it. And that's what that has really been like my motto, find joy. Like I created for myself what I call the 7 foundations to healing, or 7 foundations to thriving. And every day I make sure that these 7 things are part of my life. And these are in alphabetical order: faith, family, fitness, food, forgiveness, friends, and fun. And so those are for me. These don't have to be everybody's foundation, but for me, that's what I'm really focusing on. And like, there was been too long where fun was just not in the mix, right? Because I was just really working hard, make enough money, and, you know, that kind of thing. And now the other F, finances, is like, I don't want to say I don't care. I still have to work, but my life isn't driven by, you know, social media likes, or now I'm actually more present in my life because I don't check social media anymore. I couldn't, because it blew up, you know, I can't answer 3,000 comments. It's not possible, or even the amount of email I have. So
can you go through those 7 one more time, just a little slower?
Sure. They're in alphabetical order. So the first one is faith, because I'm not a religious person per se. I mean, I believe in God. I was raised Jewish Orthodox, actually, but I really haven't been at a temple since 1986 when my grandfather died. But I do have faith and of something greater than myself. And what I've learned from the many support groups that I have, and I'm sure there's going to be an exception out there, but all the people I know that are still alive with cancer say their faith is what got them through. So faith is really important to me. And that doesn't mean like praying or meditating. It just means that I start my day, instead of, you know, checking email, with something positive that's going to go in my brain. Maybe it's a podcast, or I've been listening to Pastor Rick Warren a lot, Joe Dispenza, but something that's more uplifting, you know, than the news, which luckily I don't have TV, so I haven't watched the news since 2018. So spending some time in faith before I get out of bed, you know?
Yeah. Well, you just mentioned Rick Warren, and I know, I think in your podcast, you mentioned he has a quote that you have embraced, you know, you can't deny the diagnosis, but you can defy
the verdict. that helped me so much, and that's what I'm attempting to do. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So yeah, he's helped me a lot. I actually wrote it. I don't write like fan letters, but I don't know if he'll ever read it. But I wrote how much it helped me just finding him at this time, because his podcast is called Daily Hope. And even if you don't want to listen to him because maybe there is too much of a religious bent for it, everybody needs daily hope in this world, whether they have cancer or not. And I do find myself going to, I don't want to say church, because church connotes things to people, but I do find myself on the weekend going to as many places of worship as possible, even if it's not my faith, because for me, there's just something tremendously healing about being in that space of other people that also have hope, and I'm not becoming any specific religion, but there's just something nice in hearing these messages and hearing the music. And so that's been really helpful to me. And that's something I'm going to continue. So I have a friend here who's also very open-minded named Trish, and we've been just trying a different church every week. It doesn't matter the denomination, because I got to tell you that if you can get by some of the dogma, the message of just love, and there's just good to be found there, at least for me at this time of my life, so I've been appreciating that very much. And then of course family, faith, family, spending time with Charles and Bailey is like my number one priority. And so when people offer me jobs, it's like, I don't know if I want to be away from Bailey 8 days or Charles anymore. I'm going to please continue to do the jobs that I accepted before this. I have a couple next year, but for the most part, it's like, I don't want to be away from them. And that's the thing with treatment, because there's some really wonderful places I'm told that I could go for treatment, but if they can't go with me, I don't want to be away from them,
I can't imagine somebody not allowing you to bring them with you. Give me an example. Like, what's a job that you would do that takes you away for 6, 7, 8 days?
Well, for example, and I have 2 of them next year, but it's incredibly healing. When I'm invited to be the guest chef at Rancho La Puerta in Mexico, it's an 8-day job out of the country. So I did accept 2 of those last year, and I'm not going to renege on my offer, but now I weigh things very carefully. And, it's funny because it was so much freedom to be able to tell people, because people were offering me jobs and I didn't want to accept them because I didn't know how fast I still have not got a symptom from cancer yet. And so I didn't know, like, well, I don't want to disappoint somebody and take a job and then find out, so now I'm honest with them and I say, this is the situation. And of course I'm going to do the job, and, and they understand that now. So, but yeah, being home and yes, Charles and Bailey could go with me anywhere for treatment, but certain places where treatment has been recommended, like Germany or Mexico, it's not super feasible for them to go. But if it's in a medical institution somewhere in the United States, of course they can go.
Yeah. Okay. And then fitness, we know about your hour and a half on the bike, working up
and
the
then
great
walking Bailey, but Bailey is so slow now. I cannot count that as fitness. I count that as family and fun, because we got, most of the time we're pushing her in a buggy. Yeah. But I never realized if, because you're from a family of athletes. And so you had that gene in you, your dad's an Olympic gold medalist, for God's sake. And your mother exercises like a maniac, and your sister, and you were a competitive swimmer and triathlete. I got the fitness memo late in life. So it was a little harder for me to adopt that as a daily habit. It really wasn't until I was in my 50s. But now, when things are positioned in a certain way, it makes it easier. So when Dr. Lyle said to me, about 10 years ago, he goes, look, because I wasn't exercising to lose weight, because we know that's not a reason to exercise. I mean, it can help, but it's not really the primary thing. It's the food, which I want to tell you, it is the food, but I got to tell you, it's not just the food. There are other healing factors that I think are sadly overlooked often in our plant-based world. But when Dr. Lyle said, just think of exercise as your anti-anxiety and antidepressant medicine that you used to be on. And then when he phrased it that way, it's like, okay, well, if I was on drugs, I would get up in the morning and take that pill. So now I just get up in the morning, and I have to do it first. Because if I let the day get away, I can find every reason not to get on the bike. But it's almost like it's just a habit. I get up, I go to the bike, it's done. I don't have to think about it for another 24 hours,
Yeah. So, okay, let's talk about the food, right?
Yeah. Well,
and obviously, I think everybody knows that, you are about as hardcore a whole food, plant-based, SOS free advocate as there is. But and I know you've probably gotten every comment under the sun, but what role do you feel plant-based nutrition has played in your cancer journey?
Right. Well, here's the thing, nobody can say for sure, but even the doctors that don't necessarily believe in some of the things that we believe about the impact of nutrition on health, they have said to me, it is your healthy diet and lifestyle that has kept this thing at bay for so long. That's what I've been told. That's what people seem to believe is the reason that I think I'm doing so well. And that if I do choose to have treatment, I might have an easier time or bounce back quicker. And so yes, I'm an SOS-free advocate in terms of the recipes I write, but I got this reputation of being Goldhammer perfect when I never really was. In other words, when I create recipes, I want everybody for every diet style to be able to use them, including the people at True North or the NHA. But that doesn't mean that you personally can't sprinkle some salt on their recipe, or you personally couldn't put some dates or something into it. So I've never been perfect with the salt. It's the hard, I don't cook with it. I just don't, because I feel like people can add theirs if they want. But I've gotten a little bit lazier as I get older, and I'm not perfect with it. So things like ketchup and barbecue sauce and mustard, condiments, for example, I can make them. I'm a chef, but I don't. I will say, though, that, my diet is a little bit more flexible now, because I talk about calorie density. Well, I've kind of had to increase the calorie density of it because I was getting too skinny, because I'd gotten down to 100 pounds at my water fast, and that is underweight. And so I'm trying to get it back up to at least 110. So I got to eat some of those nuts now. I got to eat a little bit of bread and a little bit of avocado, because this is why, when you're a hammer, you see everything as a nail. But you and I so understand calorie density and believe it. And that's why I really, if people want to lose weight, it never fails you, because just following the diet that I ate to lose weight would not put any weight on me. I can eat all the potatoes, rice, fruits, vegetables, and I couldn't gain any weight, so I had to add more of the calorically dense foods, which are bread. And I don't eat a lot of it because I have to be gluten-free. And, even when I'm eating it and enjoying it, I'm like, this isn't the healthiest thing I could be eating. And nuts and seeds and avocado and things like that, the more, as Dr. Goldhammer would call, the more concentrated calories. And it's funny because, the conventional doctors don't think nutrition has anything to do with your getting cancer or your health. And a lot of times I've heard oncologists say, oh, what you're going through this, their goal is just to have the patient gain weight. It doesn't have to be healthy weight. Yeah. Oh, just eat whatever you want. And, like for about 5 minutes, I had a pity party. Well, poor me, I can eat whatever I want. But I didn't want the unhealthy food, because, and it's not about that. I thought like, it's not like it's going to give me cancer, but it was like, I almost was like, I don't feel good when I eat unhealthy food. I've eaten healthy food so long now that when I eat unhealthy food, and I'm all about feeling good right now. And so, I just,
you've got a baseline for how you want to feel, like at a minimum, just by eating this way. I hear you loud and clear.
Yeah. Absolutely. And, I'm lucky that, everybody says, oh, sugar feeds cancer. She eats too many desserts with dates and bananas. I don't know why people think I just sit here and eat dessert all day. I don't, even though I wrote a dessert cookbook. I eat it sometimes, but most of the dessert I eat is fruit, to be honest, when I eat dessert. And most of the time, I'm so full from potatoes and sweet potatoes and veggies, I don't have room for dessert a lot of the time.
All your incredible one-pot meals. So let's talk about some of I'm still on your 7 F's. We're on food here, but I would love for you texted me some of the negative comments that people have said.
Those were funny. We did a whole show about that with Dr.
You did?
Yeah. Okay, and it's just they're just ridiculous.
What are some of the crazy things that people are saying caused your cancer?
Oh, I wore an acrylic shirt once on the show. I wore a shirt with acrylic fibers. Yes.
Okay. And what? And then the pressure cooker? What about the pressure cooker?
Right. Well, here's the thing. Anytime you have, one of the things Dr. Letterman said is we all have cancer in our body, but it's so small that most of us can't detect it. And my tumors weren't detected till they were 4 millimeters. But that means whatever is in me has been growing for like over 20 years. I didn't even get a pressure cooker till 10 years ago. Yeah. Right. And and I didn't get an air fryer till maybe 7 years ago. And people say, well, she colors her hair. I didn't start doing that till about 5 years ago. So, I'm not saying these are, I don't know, this is not what caused it. People really, I think, discount often in our plant-based world, or just in the world in general, the powerful effect that genetics has on your life. And, and of course, genetics loads the gun, and diet and lifestyle can pull the trigger. But I have a powerful, strong family history of cancer, having brother died of it, grandfather, uncle, father. I'm the first female that I know of that has had it. But, I don't know. Why does anybody get anything? But I do believe that I have to do healing in what you might say is more the emotional, spiritual realm more than just the physical, because I feel until I do that, I'm not going to heal. And those are things like that's why when I talk about the magic unicorn mark, I almost don't want to talk about it because I never dealt with any kind of feelings or emotion. Like I always would sweep them under the carpet, but they're saying for me to get better, this is something I have to do. And it's funny because after food, the next F is forgiveness. And I think the third person I called after, poor Charles was like the last to know, it's like, I'll tell him when I can. So it was my stand-up comedy teacher, Carrie, then it was Dr. Goldhammer, and then I called Chris Wark. And I've been in his program.
Yeah, Chris.
And so what he said to me, he said, with the lifestyle isn't the problem here. Yeah, you can have more juices and more raw salads. He goes, but your problem is you need to forgive everyone. And so that has been the hardest of the F's, and the hardest thing is, and that's one of the things I'm working on now is forgiveness, of people that have hurt me and things like that. And that kind of thing. So,
well, what I would imagine. So when you say it's the hardest thing kind of squaring up and having the conversation with them? Because I would imagine afterwards, I would imagine it feels great.
Yeah. The thing is I'm willing to forgive, but I don't have a template. And so I don't always know how to do it. And so that's where, everybody says, well, just forgive. And one of the things that's helped, this is the other thing. Maybe some people, it's so funny because I've asked people to pray for me and they're like, well, I'm an atheist. And I'm like, okay, well then, send me a joke. That's the second best thing. Yeah. But one of the things I have been doing is I've been going to talk to clergy people of different faiths. And they always talk about forgiveness because in every religion, there is something about it. In Judaism, there's Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. And one of the things that different clergy people have told me, and I've talked to a Catholic priest and a Presbyterian minister and an Adventist pastor, is that forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. So the idea is that if somebody has hurt you, especially in a manner that you feel is unforgivable, you still need to forgive them for you, but that doesn't mean that they have to be in your life. And so I think what people don't understand is that forgiveness doesn't always have to mean reconciliation. And so now that I understand that, I can and hopefully move forward to things that involve I guess I don't have a template. And if there's an expert out there watching on forgiveness that can teach me, what is it that you actually have to do to forgive somebody, that's where I've been kind of stuck.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I would imagine too, let's say you're contacting somebody to forgive them, but they aren't aware that you hurt them or whatever. So maybe you've got to take a couple steps back in order to, you know what I mean? To let them know you don't know it, but you really hurt me back in 1983 when blah, 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 but I forgive you.
Yeah. And I'm not even sure you have to even be in touch with the person. And that's where the forgiveness work comes in. I think people have suggested writing letters or just talking in your, it doesn't mean like you actually have to, especially if you were abused, you don't have to necessarily face the abuser. And this is where I'm still a little bit weak in knowing exactly what people do to forgive other people. And because people have forgiven the unforgivable in life. I mean, people have had far worse things that happened to them than me, where people have forgiven somebody murdered their child and they've forgiven them. Now, that doesn't mean that when you forgive them, this is another thing, a mistake people make. People think if you forgive somebody, you're condoning their behavior. That is not what it means. This is where I'm learning to, I feel like I have to do that. And, it's funny because there was a book called Don't Sweat the Small Stuff. And in the scheme of things, compared to cancer, it's all small stuff now. So when I think about some of these perceived slights, and I say perceived slights because I'm a very sensitive person, and some of these things that hurt me, the other person may not have even intended it, right? Yeah. But really, it really is about just letting it go, because it's really irrelevant right now to my present and to my future healing. But I'm just, you really just have, it's almost like until I accepted the fact that I actually could die, did I have the courage to actually live.
That's interesting. Can you say that one more time?
Yeah, I finally had to, until I accepted the fact that I could actually die from lung cancer, that I had the courage to actually live. And by living my life in a very meaningful way, not just going through life as many people do, but really like and it just sounds, I feel like, again, Emily, in our town, I feel so trite saying this, but it is different. It's like you get a second chance. It's kind of like people, I've never met them, but I've been watching a lot of things about people with near death experiences that come
Yeah.
back. It's like you see the world completely different when you feel that your time is limited. And this is a message. Everybody's time is limited. You just don't know it. I've been woken up.
When do you feel like that you had that epiphany or that aha moment? Was it 2 years ago when you were first diagnosed, or was it more recently when it grew and you're like, wow, this is...
Yeah. Great question. It was when it was November 5th when when they were saying things like, well, you might want to get a death doula, and like when people were like actually basically saying to me, hey, lady, you could really die now. Like when it was stage 1, it felt like, I guess I just didn't want to accept it, and I didn't want to deal with it, and it just seemed like the tumor was small, and like I didn't have any symptoms. But yeah, when I jumped up to stage 3 with a MET, then it was like, that was a wake-up call. And I realized that I had to be willing to give up the life that I've been living to have the life that I'm supposed to be living now. And it's just like, putting on it's like just turning the cruiser around, So I guess in a way it's a gift, but it doesn't always feel like it.
So at this point, and I'm sure you've like thought about this till the cows come home, but is it fair to say that you could live another 6 months, or you could live another 20 years? You just have no idea at this point.
I don't know. And that's why, that old adage, in AA, a day at a time, that's even too long for me sometimes, because on days that are hard, that's too long. So it's just, this idea of the power of now, it's now.
Yeah.
It's now. And I don't want people to have cancer or any disease, but I hope they will get that message. And if anything, that, all the things in my life that I've tried to do to help the world in a positive way seem to pale in comparison by the message that I'm shouting now, is that this is all you have, all of you. And just you got to embrace it, because our time on earth is very short anyway. But it's like when you actually know that your days are numbered, you live your life in, I think, at least for me, in a more meaningful way. And, you don't do things you don't want to do anymore. And I was doing a lot of that, and sometimes resenting it just because, I want people to like me, and, I've got to make money, and you don't have to do that anymore. I mean, obviously people, obviously have to go to work and make money, most people, but it's just like an epiphany.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I'm 61. And I've got, my children now are 10, 15, and 17. Anne's 89, Essie's 91. These people that have always been superheroes in my life are now mortals, right? And so and it seems like every year goes by quicker and quicker the older I get. And so I have been thinking more and more about, like, death, like, what is death, and where do we go, or where do we not go, and what is that next journey look like? And nobody really knows, right? but I want you to know, my grandfather, Barney Cryle, who introduced the lumpectomy into the United States, ironically, his first wife, my mother's mother, died of breast cancer at the age of 55. And they wrote a book called More Than Booty. And one of the last paragraphs he wrote, and I have this written out, AJ, so I got it right. But he said, and this was during her memorial service, life has been given and life has been taken away. Life and death are one, even as the river and the sea are one. Death is only a horizon, and a horizon is but the limit of our sight. Mm-hmm. And I just think that's so beautiful. And wonderful.
And what you said about the older you get, the faster it goes, that's actually true, because the older you get, however long you're going to live is less time than what you've already lived. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Big time. So I think we got through your 7 F's. I mean,
Yeah, well, friends and fun. So we got through forgiveness, friends and fun, and only surrounding yourself with people that really are friends, that can support you. And having, I mean, maybe fun isn't that big of a deal to other people, but for me it is, because it's just you have to have some lightness. And that's why when I was first doing stand-up comedy as somebody that was diagnosed with cancer, people were not laughing. And I that's why I need to explain to them that no, I really want you to laugh, not at me, but with me. And I'm not making fun of cancer, by the way, or other people with cancer. I'm making basically fun of myself and what I've been going through and the ability to handle that. I'm actually going to be performing it in Las Vegas, Labor Day weekend of next year at the Tuscany. I was asked to host a plant-based conference, and I was just going to host it. And then they said, well, why don't you be in the comedy night? And I'm like, okay. So now I got to really work really hard on getting the best set possible, because
wow. You are so, one of the things I've learned about you, because I've known you now since about maybe 2004 or 5, when you first had us over to your place for dinner, and Essie and myself. You really, AJ, you're not only one of the most creative people that I know on the planet, you also are one of the hardest working, and you would give literally like the shirt off your back to somebody that needs it. So you really an incredible human being. And why was I going there? What did you say that prompted me to say that? I'm trying to remember
about comedy and about fun and about laughing.
Well, yes, but so you mentioned you're getting ready to do that stand-up bit in Las Vegas, right? And I can't even imagine how you're like writing things down and working so hard to get it just right. I mean, you wrote me a song that followed, Flintstones, Meet the Flintstones. You wrote one.
Meet the Esselstyns. They're a really skinny family from the town of Cleveland. You will not believe how much they eat. I can't remember the rest.
But you also did one for me and the guys at Engine 2 when we first came out, right? I mean, anyway, so
I love doing song parodies. I guess I'm a frustrated comedy writer. So yeah, but I love when people have a sense of humor about this, because I really feel that that's the only thing that's going to get me through personally. And I love when, people that know now, I love it when they say, how are you? And I go, I got cancer. How do you think I am? I do it like that, like in a funny voice. But I have learned that it's really helpful if people, instead of saying, how are you? If they say, how are you today? Because how are you is like, well, what do you mean? How am I? How am I mentally, emotionally, physically, financially, spiritually? But how are you right now? That's a better question to ask somebody with a chronic disease, because the big how are you is usually a much longer, and then I can just say, hey, right now I'm feeling pretty good. I'm not feeling anxious. I have no. So that's just a little tip for all you well-meaning people out there. Instead of how are you right now?
Yeah. One of my very, very good friends, his mother just died about a week and a half ago, and I called him up, and I didn't ask him, how you doing, but he said one of the things that's really hard is everybody asks how you doing, and he's like, well, the truth of the matter is it's a really personal question, and I really just can't answer that right now, but it's tough. Yeah. I mean, wow.
Because you don't want to alienate people for asking, because they care. No. That's why I said, just send me a joke. Because if you send me a joke, I know you're thinking of me, and then it opens up for me to be able to say, hey, I'm really not doing well today. But it's, the lifelines are not just the people that I've recently met in cancer support groups. There's certain people, and this is why being plant-based community is the most incredible community, because the people that know, I have doctors, and I don't even want to mention their name because some of them are like super famous, that have given me their cell phone numbers. And I say, you can text me anytime, kind of like what Dr. McDougall was doing when he was the only one that knew. Mm-hmm. But, there's a part of me that just feels very, and again, I haven't addressed this. This is the first time saying it out loud, but I feel guilty for having cancer. I feel like I've let people down, because it's because my whole life has been about, not my whole life, but at least the last 47 years has been about advocating for the benefits, the health benefits of a plant-based diet, which I think are many. You see all the time in your daily life how people have reversed heart disease and diabetes and autoimmune disease. And yet I think part of the reason I didn't come out sooner is because I actually felt embarrassed,
Mhm.
and so one of the things that Dr. Simran Malhotra told me, and she's a cancer previvor, she's a plant-based doctor. She said, you have to look at the plant-based diet as a seatbelt, and your
Mm.
good exercise habits as a seatbelt. He goes, we are for seatbelts. We should wear seatbelts. And seatbelts have saved a lot of lives. But even with a seatbelt, you can still get into a pretty bad car accident. And so that really helped me a lot for just, feeling guilty. Like I let the vegan community down because I got sick.
Yeah. Well, that's a great analogy. Let me ask you this, because I'm sure you've taken a deep dive into lung cancer. Are there any misconceptions about lung cancer that you could talk
Yeah.
about?
I haven't taken as deep of a dive as I probably should have because I sometimes get depressed when I see these things. But
Yeah.
well, first of all, it's on the rise. We don't know why, but it's on the rise, especially on the rise with women, and especially on the rise with people who
Mm.
don't smoke. Like Andy Kaufman, for example. I have 1, 2, 3 vegan friends that are now in their 80s and 90s. None of them had smoked, and they all had lung cancer. That's weird, and I don't. So I think we live in a toxic world in general, and we do our best to live in a clean environment and eat as healthfully as possible. But the world itself is toxic. And,
Mhm.
here's the other thing. I could sit here all day and ask myself why, but it's not going to help me going forward. I need to get this gentleman on my show. He was on, but not for the reason that I would have him on. His name is Pete. And Pete is an old dear friend of mine who's a quadriplegic. And sometimes when I don't know if I should say this. I don't know if he's going to be watching, but sometimes when I really feel down and hopeless, I think about how hard his life is a quadriplegic, right?
Yeah.
He's in his 50s now. And, right now I still have complete function. I can do everything. I can take care of myself, and he needs, aids just to do the act, just to get out of bed and just to go to the bathroom and just to get dressed. And he's accomplished so much in his life. He's written screenplays. He's an accomplished, well-known mouth painter, for example. But one of the things he said, as my friend, I know this, is that this happened to him very young. I want to say 20, but and he said that after he had the accident, he was in a hospital for a long time, a rehab, and he said some of the people that were quadriplegics would take their wheelchairs out in the street and get run over on purpose because they
Mm.
couldn't live like
Mm.
that. He said that he vowed after the accident to never ask himself, never to look back. Coulda, shoulda, woulda, what could I, why did this happen? And that's kind of what I'm doing, because everybody wants to know, did she smoke? Yes, I smoked very briefly my junior year of college, but this kind of cancer they're saying isn't caused by smoking. They
Yeah.
put smoking history insignificant, but it almost, like Dr. Goldhammer says, it doesn't even matter at this point, because I can't go back unless you have a time machine, Rip, which would be awesome, because there's so many things I can fix and so many people I can apologize to, like my mother, for example.
Mm.
I can't go back anyway. So what is the point of beating myself up or obsessing about why did this happen to me? I know a lot of the people in the plant-based world don't believe in God, and but I do talk to God as I know him or her, and and so I remember, like, one of the first things I said this in my head, I was like, why me? And, like, I swear to God, I heard a voice that said, why not you? So, and again, as much as I don't want this, I think it would be much harder for me to watch my loved ones go through it, like Charles and Bailey. So he's the one I feel really bad about, because he has to watch that. And that's why humor, I get sad, of course, and I cry. Or as Dr. Goldhammer says, I desalinate. But I tell you, after going public, I cry a lot less, and the tears are a lot shorter, because having the support that I have now, and just knowing that people care, and that those that pray are praying, and
Yeah.
it's again, a journey, a burden shared is a burden in half. And now I don't feel like I have to go through it alone. And now I want to reach out to the people that do feel like they are going through it alone, or that don't have the information, or that can't call Dr. Goldhammer on the phone,
Yeah.
So again, it's really not about, I'm not here to diagnose or treat or tell people what to do, but I would mention that whatever you're going to do, live your best life regardless of what you're doing, because take a look at that. And the healing factors, if you're familiar with the work of Dr. Kelly Turner from Radical Recovery and Radical Hope, she is a PhD that wrote these books about, she studied people with cancer and how they had some healing factors in common, 10 of them. And one of them was regular exercise, which I do, changing their diet for a healthier diet, specifically cutting out processed food. And those are things that do give people hope. And the one that I was missing was, of course, the mental, emotional, spiritual, for, the one that had to do with, with, the non-physical. Like, it's very easy to eat kale and exercise, at least for me, but to, express my feelings and that kind of stuff is hard. So I feel like that if there is a reason that contributed or I got cancer, it had to do with that. And so that's where I'm putting my healing right now.
Well, it's interesting because, I did a little research, and, just discovered that so many of it is idiopathic. I mean, they can't figure out what's caused, this lung cancer. And to your point, 12.5% have never smoked, right? And so the number one cause, it seems, of lung cancer for non-smokers is radon exposure, which are these radioactive gas that accumulates, in businesses or homes. And there's an actual test that you can take to see if you have it in your home. Secondhand smoke. I can't tell you how many of my friends growing up in the 60s, 70s, 80s had parents that smoked cigarettes. And then there's air pollution, obviously, occupational exposure. Let me ask you this. You obviously work with a lot of fine flowers. Is that something that,
I don't use a lot of flour in my recipes, though. That's the thing. I try to just use oats, and I don't even grind them. But I did live till the age of 13 with 3 adult smokers in the house. So that is something. And, when I think about all the apartments I lived in LA, I know some of them actually had mold, not mine. So, again, I can't go back and just excuse me, I used to live here 20 years ago. I've got this radon meter. Can I just check that kind of thing? So, that is that.
Yeah. And then the last thing was genetic mutations, right? Just genetic factors. And so just fascinating.
Again, I almost wish we could have done this after the biopsy, because there's still a part of me that's holding out hope that maybe it's not cancer, that it's some weird fungal infection or something. But I do remember on my honeymoon, I got sick in Mexico. We were on a cruise, and I didn't drink the water, but we were at a restaurant, and I ordered a club soda, not even thinking that there was ice in the glass. And that is how I got the water. I ended up in the hospital for a while with what they called a life-threatening lung infection from drinking the water in Mexico. And I keep thinking, is that what set the stage? And are these tumors really, scars? So the other thing is, these tumors were found incidentally. I want people to know that, I wasn't looking for, a cancer diagnosis. I had a misdiagnosis of interstitial cystitis. And so I was having an abdominal CT scan when just some small 4-millimeter tumors were picked up on my liver and my lung back in 2022. And they told me not to worry. But then eventually they told me to worry.
Yeah. How are you sleeping?
I'm so lucky that for some reason, I think because when you have the level of anxiety that I've had in my life, I spin so much all day, both physically spin on the bike and metaphorically spinning with the, I'm like a little whirling, I'm kind of like your mom that way, although I don't think she has anxiety, but we're both kind of a little bit of whirling dervishes, just like the Energizer bunnies, that once I hit that pillow, I pretty much sleep through the night. But lately I've been taking a supplement, not a drug. The doctors want me to just make sure I get good sleep. It's called magnesium glycinate. It's just a little and now I sleep through the night without having to wake up and go to the bathroom. So diet, sleep, and exercise, Dr. Goldhammer says, prioritize those. And I wish other people would prioritize those before they got sick, because this is, these things are so important. But, I think it's just human nature that people often have to have this wake up call or hit rock bottom, before they'll make a change, But it was kind of a slap in the face that maybe I'm not living my life to the best of the.
Well, then that's the silver lining, right? Yeah. So what are your plans with Chef AJ Live? You going to continue doing that?
Yes. So what happened is, the doctors at True North said, you're working too much, because I didn't get a day off for 4 years and 3 months. And this was my own doing, because, being a workaholic, when you're somebody that's really like I was, not in touch with my emotions or feelings, being a workaholic is a great thing, because you make a lot of money and you don't really have to deal with your feelings. I think that's why some of us do it. But they said you can't keep working that much. So after 4 years and 3 months of going live every day, on June 30th, I did my last daily show. So I've only been doing the show about once a week. However, I really want to up it a little bit more, because I'm just so excited about doing this series called Thriving in the Face of Cancer, having some of the plant-based doctors on. And again, it's not a series that we're going to tell you this is what you do if you have cancer, because that's deeply personal. And I'm not even sure that what one doctor says might be right in general or for you, but it's more about giving people hope, talking to the doctors that have seen some of their patients get better from cancer, what they did, also talking to people that are survivors. That to me is like crucial. You need to know that no matter how, okay, one of the guys I'm going to have on the show, he's the wife of a doctor, stage 4 pancreatic cancer, still alive years later. That's the one that people say it's a death sentence. My brother died after 3 months after diagnosis from pancreatic cancer. So, I think about Louise Hay says, all incurable means is that nobody that we know so far has been cured. So don't let your diagnosis be your destiny. That is my message. Your diagnosis is not your destiny.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I want you to know, AJ, how much I love you, how much I know that the Plant Strong audience loves you. Thank you for sharing this very personal bit of information with us. And I want you to know how much I'm rooting for you.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Loving Kale.
Hugging Kale. Hey, can you hit me with a Plant Strong fist bump on the way out? Boom. Chef AJ, thank you for sharing your time and your heart with us. We are with you and support you every step of the way. Your strength and vulnerability is truly awe-inspiring, and I know it will help others in their own personal journeys through illness. I would encourage you to follow Chef AJ's Instagram and YouTube channels, and I'll make sure to put those links in today's show notes to make it easy for you. Let's continue to shower her with our love, support, and humor, because human connection is the best medicine. Thanks so much for listening, and always, always keep it Plant Strong. The Plant Strong podcast team includes Carrie Barrett, Lori Kordowich, and Amy Mackey. If you like what you hear, do us a favor and share the show with your friends and loved ones. You can always leave a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And while you're there, make sure to hit that follow button so that you never miss an episode. As always, this and every episode is dedicated to my parents, Dr. Caldwell B. Esselstyn Jr. and Ann Cryle Esselstyn. Thanks so much for listening.